My daughter-in-law accidentally sent my son's lunchbox to my office. I showed it to a colleague as a joke. He immediately went pale and told me to take my son to the hospital right now. Why? I asked. I can't explain it to you now. It's something terrible. Do as I say, or your son won't survive. What I discovered at the hospital chilled me to the bone. If you're reading this story, I want you to know how far this tale of vengeance has traveled. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I'm genuinely curious to see how widespread this story has become. On that Monday morning in my house in Washington, D.C., things were as busy as ever. The sound of pots and pans clanging in the kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, and the light scent of a perfume sample I'd left on the dining table all blended together. I was rushing around getting ready for the office to oversee the new perfume production line, the pride and joy of my life. My son Benjamin was already dressed in a crisp suit, preparing for an important meeting at the financial firm where he worked as a managing director. Watching my boy comb his hair in front of the mirror filled me with pride. Benjamin was everything I had, my only child whom I had dedicated my entire life to raising and loving. In the kitchen, Clara, my daughter-in-law, was busy preparing our lunches. She'd been up since early with her long hair pulled back in a ponytail. As she stirred a pan, she chatted on the phone with her friends. Her voice was cheerful chatter full of laughter, but her hands moved with practiced ease, packing food into 2 containers, a large one for Benjamin and a smaller one for me. I stood in the doorway, watching her with a warm feeling in my heart. What a thoughtful girl you are, my dear. You don't just take care of your husband. You take care of your mother-in-law too, I said, unable to hide my smile. Clara turned around, her eyes sparkling, and smiled faintly. I just want everyone to eat well, Mom. Eating out isn't safe anymore. Her words touched me deeply. I had always seen Clara as a daughter, my beautiful and lively daughter-in-law, who always knew how to take care of the family. As we were getting ready to leave, Clara rushed to give me the small container while putting the large one in Benjamin's car. I carefully placed the container in my bag, thinking about how incredibly attentive she was. Clara was a family woman who always made me feel at ease. I walked out the door, not realizing that Lunchbox would change everything in my life. At lunchtime, my office was as lively as usual. The younger employees gathered around the break room table, laughing and gossiping about their spouses and children. I opened my bag and pulled out the container, but immediately noticed something was wrong. This wasn't the small container Clara had prepared for me, it was the large one, Benjamin's. I laughed and shook my head. Clara is more scatterbrained than her old mother-in-law, I thought, believing it was just a cute mix-up. When I opened the lid, I noticed the rim of the container had some small white crystals like sugar. How strange! A savory dish with sugar on the rim, I muttered, both curious and amused. The employees nearby crowded around and teased me. Ma'am, the rim of your container looks like a frosted margarita glass. The whole office burst into laughter. The atmosphere was as cheerful as a small party. I picked up the container and took it to David, my closest colleague. He had been a doctor before retiring and now worked as a workplace safety consultant for my perfume company. David was always the person I trusted most, the one I shared all the little stories of my life with. Look at this, I said, laughing and showing him the container. Clara is so young, but she's already more absent-minded than me. She cooked a savory dish for her husband and put sugar on the rim of the container. Maybe she thinks Benjamin works so hard that she wants him to gain weight. I joked, expecting him to roar with laughter like everyone else. But David didn't laugh. He took the container, tilted it under the fluorescent office light, and gently rubbed the rim with his finger. Suddenly his face went pale, and he squinted as if he had just seen something horrible. Who prepared this meal for him? He asked in a serious, low voice. I frowned, a little confused. My daughter-in-law, as usual. She prepares lunch for my son and me to take to work. Today she accidentally gave me Benjamin's container. Why? I responded, trying to remain calm, even though a terrible premonition was beginning to creep over me. David didn't answer right away. He looked at me with eyes full of concern, and suddenly said in a loud, urgent tone that startled me, You need to take your son to the hospital right now. His words were like a direct stab to the heart. I froze, feeling the blood in my veins turn to ice. The laughter and chatter in the office abruptly stopped. A deathly silence fell over everything. The young employees looked at each other, bewildered, not understanding what was happening. I tried to keep my composure and asked again, "Why?" "Explain to me, David, what's going on?" But he just shook his head. His voice trembled. "I can't explain it to you now. It's something terrible. Do what I say, or your son won't survive." I felt my heart shatter. Benjamin, the son I had protected my entire life, the boy I loved more than myself, was in danger. I didn't understand it. I didn't want to believe it. But the gravity in David's voice stopped me from doubting. I turned to him, struggling to keep my voice from breaking. "Are you serious? This isn't a joke, is it?" David took my hand. His eyes were red. "I swear to you I would never joke about something like this. Those white crystals are not sugar. You have to act now." His words were like an alarm bell that woke up all my senses. I didn't know exactly what was happening, but my mother's instinct told me that something was very, very wrong. The container was still there on the table, a silent warning. I looked at it, then at David, and for a moment, I felt like the whole world was collapsing at my feet. David practically pushed me out of the office. His voice was urgent and full of anguish. "Go now. You can't waste a second." He already had his phone in hand, calling a contact in the toxicology department at the University of Maryland Medical Center. His voice trembled, but it was clear. "I need you to analyze a sample immediately. It's a matter of life or death." I stood there clutching the container, my mind in chaos. Just a few minutes ago, I was joking about the white crystals on the rim, and now that container felt like a bomb that could destroy my entire world. I carefully put it in a plastic bag as if I were handling evidence of a crime. "I'm going right now," I told David, hardening my voice to hide the fear growing inside me. He nodded with a serious look. "I'll see you at the hospital. Don't let anyone touch that container." I called my personal driver, Mr. Jones, who had worked for my family for over 20 years. When I told him to drive straight to the medical center, he looked at me through the rearview mirror with curiosity, but didn't ask any questions. "Faster." "Jones," I said hoarsely. During the ride, I sat in the back seat, clinging to the plastic bag, my gaze fixed on the window. The streets of Washington, D.C. were as bustling as ever, with yellow cabs whizzing by, street vendors shouting from the sidewalks, and the bright sun reflecting off the glass buildings. But everything seemed far away, as if I were in another world, one where there was only me and the terror of what was about to happen. When we arrived at the hospital, I walked into the reception area, still clutching the plastic bag. The young nurse with thick-rimmed glasses looked up surprised when I said, "I need you to analyze a container of food. There's something strange in it." She blinked as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing, but then the phone on her desk rang. I vaguely heard David's voice on the other end of the line, and the nurse nodded, jotting something down quickly. "All right, ma'am. Please wait a moment. The sample will be taken to the lab immediately," she said in a professional tone that couldn't hide her curiosity. I just nodded, too weak to explain more. An employee in a white lab coat took the sample, and I was guided to a waiting room down the hall. The hallway of the University of Maryland Medical Center was full of people, of hurried footsteps, of the monotonous sound of the PA system calling out patients, and the smell of disinfectant hanging in the air. I sat down, clasping my hands together, trying to stay calm, but every minute that passed felt like an hour. I looked at the clock on the wall. The minute hand moved with an exasperating slowness, as if mocking my patience. In my mind, images of a young Benjamin appeared, running through the park holding my hand. Older Benjamin on the podium receiving his college diploma with a radiant smile, and even more recently, when he complained of feeling tired, rubbing his stomach with a weak voice. "It must be the stress from work, Mom." I had thought it was just stress like any other young man. But now David's words echoed in my head. "Or your son won't survive." I felt my heart tighten. How could this be? Who would want to harm Benjamin, my good, hard-working son? I took out my phone and dialed Benjamin's number. It rang, but he didn't answer. I knew he was in an important meeting, but the silence on the other end of the line made my heart clench. I left him a message, my fingers trembling as I typed, "Benjamin, You have to get a medical checkup today in secret. Don't tell anyone, not even your wife. I pressed send and stared at the screen, waiting for a response, but nothing came. I told myself to calm down, but the anxiety was building like a wave about to drown me. Finally, after an eternity, a young doctor came out of the lab. He wore a name tag that read Dr. Ethan Miller. His face was serious, but his gaze was kind. "You're the person who brought in the food container, right?" he asked, holding a sheet of paper. I nodded, my heart pounding as if it wanted to escape my chest. He sat down next to me and said in a slow but clear voice, "We analyzed the food sample. It contains arsenic. It's an extremely toxic substance that, if consumed continuously for a long period, can cause damage to the stomach, liver, kidneys, and can even lead to death." I listened to his words, paralyzed. The word arsenic echoed in my head as sharp as a blade. I was stunned, unable to say anything. I just stared at the doctor, hoping I had heard wrong. But Ethan continued, his voice growing more serious. "Symptoms like fatigue, abdominal pain, nausea, they match perfectly with chronic poisoning. If your son has been eating this food for a long time, there is a high risk that he has been poisoned." My mind reeled. Suddenly, I remembered the times Benjamin complained of fatigue, the nights he sat on the couch rubbing his stomach with a pale face. "It must be the pressure from work," he used to say, and I had believed him. I even took him to a doctor, but they only prescribed vitamins and recommended rest. How could I have ever imagined that in those carefully prepared lunches, a deadly poison was hidden every single day? I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my skin, trying not to fall apart right there. "Thank you, doctor," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. Ethan nodded. He placed a hand on my shoulder as if to comfort me, and then left. I walked out of the hospital feeling like my feet weighed a ton. Sitting in the car, I hugged the plastic bag that held the container as if it were the final proof of a terrifying truth. The streets of Washington, D.C. were still noisy with the sound of car horns and people's laughter, but I couldn't hear anything anymore. In my head, only one question repeated over and over. Who did this? Who would want to harm Benjamin? And then a thought chilled me to the bone. Clara? My daughter-in-law, the one who had prepared the food. The person I had always trusted. The one I loved like a daughter. No, it couldn't be, I told myself. Clara was always so attentive. She took care of Benjamin with every meal, every moment. But then the image of the white crystals on the rim of the container came to my mind, and David's voice echoed. It's something terrible. I took out my phone and checked the message I had sent Benjamin. Still no response. I wanted to call again, but I stopped my hand. If it was Clara, I couldn't let her suspect anything. I needed time to investigate, to protect my son. Sitting in the car, I looked out the window. The sunset light reflected off the skyscrapers. But in my heart, there was only darkness. Benjamin was everything I had. I had lost my husband 10 years ago, and I had built the perfume brand all by myself to leave it to my son. I couldn't lose him. I couldn't. That afternoon, I couldn't go straight home. My mind was still in a state of chaos after what Dr. Miller had told me at the University of Maryland Medical Center. I needed answers, a clue to understand why this nightmare was happening to Benjamin. I decided to drive directly to the office of Mr. Harrison, my personal attorney, who had helped me with all the legal matters of my perfume brand for over 20 years. If there was anyone who understood my assets and my wishes, it was him. When I entered his office, Mr. Harrison was sitting behind his desk with his gold-rimmed glasses, carefully reading a file. When he saw me, he looked up and gave me a kind smile. Mrs. Wallace, what a surprise to see you here without an appointment. Is something important going on? I sat down in the leather chair in front of him, getting straight to the point. Mr. Harrison, I need you to review my will and all the documents related to my estate right now. My voice sounded firmer than I expected, as if I were trying to hide the storm of emotions I felt inside. Mr. Harrison frowned, but didn't ask any more questions. He stood up, opened a filing cabinet, and took out a thick folder. This is the last draft you signed last year, he said, placing the papers in front of me. I went through the pages one by one. The dry words about properties, real estate, and company shares paraded before my eyes. But when I reached the section on the distribution of the inheritance, I felt my blood run cold. In the will, I had clearly stipulated that my assets would be divided equally between Benjamin and Clara, my son and my daughter-in-law, whom I had always considered as a daughter. But there was a clause that made me shudder. If one of them passed away before me, the survivor would automatically inherit the entirety of the assets. In other words, if Benjamin died, Clara would become the sole heir. I looked up at Harrison. My voice trembled. And if I'm still alive, could she obtain anything? Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses. His voice was serious and clear. If you are still alive, you continue to own the perfume brand and have every right to change the will at any time. But if Benjamin were to pass away before you, his personal assets, the properties, the investments would gradually pass into Clara's hands. When you pass away legally, it's the shortest path for her to get everything. He paused, looking at me to make sure I understood the weight of his words. I nodded, but inside everything was collapsing. The puzzle pieces were beginning to fit together, and the picture that was forming left me frozen. On the way home, I couldn't stop thinking about Clara. She had always been the perfect daughter-in-law in my eyes. Beautiful, attentive, always knowing how to make me happy. But now my memories of her felt distorted. I remembered the times she discreetly asked me about the value of the house in Milan, or her casual questions about my investment projects in the Hamptons. Once during dinner, she let it slip. "If you're not in charge someday, I'll continue to develop the brand, won't I, Mom? I promise I'll do a great job." At the time, I just smiled, thinking it was the concern of a dedicated daughter-in-law. But now that phrase echoed in my head, sharp as a warning. Could Clara have planned everything for a long time? Could she have seen Benjamin and me not as her family, but as obstacles on her path to an immense fortune? When I arrived home, it was almost dark. The yellow light of the porch illuminated Clara's figure sitting in a wicker chair, checking her phone. She looked up and smiled at me as radiant as ever. "You're home, Mom. I just booked an appointment at the spa for the weekend. Do you want to come with me? They have an incredible, relaxing massage package." Her voice was soft and carefree, but it no longer gave me the same warmth. I looked into her eyes, trying to find some sign, a hint of doubt, a glimmer of guilt. But I saw nothing but that perfect smile. "I have a commitment, my dear. You go with your friends," I replied dryly, quickly entering the house. I didn't want her to see my hands trembling or the fury and pain I was trying to suppress in my gaze. In the living room, I sank onto the couch and put my hands on my head. My heart was torn. Part of me refused to believe that Clara, the girl I had welcomed into my family with open arms, could do something so monstrous. But the other part, a mother's reason, screamed at me that I had to protect Benjamin, even if it meant facing the cruelest truth. I remembered the first days when Benjamin brought Clara home to introduce her. She was shy. She held Benjamin's hand and told me, "I promise I'll take good care of him, ma'am." I believed her. I thought I was lucky to have a daughter-in-law like her, but now, each of those memories was like a knife plunging into my heart. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest, as if a rock were crushing my dreams. My sleep hadn't helped at all. I only had nightmares of Benjamin, the container, and Clara's smile. A smile I no longer knew if it was real or a mask. I put on a dark blue blouse, the color Benjamin once said made me look powerful, and drove to his office downtown. I didn't warn him. I just sent a short message. "I need to see you right now." On the way, I tried to stay calm, but my hands were gripping the steering wheel, soaked in sweat. I knew this conversation would change everything, but I couldn't postpone it any longer. Benjamin had to know the truth. When I arrived, Benjamin had just come out of a meeting. His jacket was a little wrinkled, but his smile was still radiant when he saw me. "Mom, what are you doing here without warning? Are you here to see if I'm working hard?" He joked in his usual light-hearted tone. Seeing my son there so healthy and carefree broke my heart. How was I going to tell him that the woman he loved, the person he trusted most, might be plotting to kill him? But I had no choice. Benjamin, come to your office with me. It's something important, I said with a seriousness I hadn't intended. He frowned. His smile faded, but he nodded and led me to his private office. The office was spacious, with a large window overlooking the bustling city. Benjamin sat down and motioned for me to take a seat in front of him. What's wrong, Mom? Why so serious? Is there a problem with the perfume company? He asked, still thinking it was a normal conversation. I didn't respond immediately. I opened my purse and took out the folder with the lab results from the University of Maryland Medical Center and the copy of the will that Mr. Harrison had given me the day before. I placed them on the desk, pushed them towards him, and looked him straight in the eyes. Read it, Benjamin, I said, my voice containing emotion. Benjamin took the documents and began to turn the pages. His expression quickly changed from indifference to confusion and then to a deathly paleness. When he read the lab results, I saw his hands trembling, making the paper rustle. Arsenic in my food? He looked up, his eyes wide as if he couldn't believe what he was reading. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady, and told him everything. How I had confused his container with mine, the white crystals on the lid, David's warning, and the lab results that confirmed the presence of a deadly poison. I told him slowly, detail by detail, as if by speaking quickly, I couldn't bear the weight of the truth. Benjamin remained paralyzed, still clinging to the papers. He shook his head over and over as if wanting to reject it all. It can't be, Mom, he said, his voice choked. Clara loves me. She loves our family. She cooks for me every day. She takes care of every detail. How could she? His voice trailed off and I saw his eyes redden. Seeing my son like that tore me apart. I wanted to hug him, to tell him it was all a misunderstanding, but the evidence was in front of us. I couldn't lie to him or to myself. I let Benjamin absorb the shock, and then said in a slow but firm voice, I know it's hard to believe, son. I don't want to believe it either, but the evidence is here. And do you remember how your health has been these past few months? The times you complained of fatigue, stomach pain, nausea? I thought it was because of work, but now I know it wasn't. I paused and looked him in the eyes. Benjamin, I can't lose you. You need to face this truth no matter how painful it is. Benjamin lowered his head, covering his face with his hands and closing his eyes tightly. I knew he was trying to connect the dots. The nights he came home exhausted, the times Clara brought him a glass of orange juice, or the meals she prepared for him with a tender smile. Suddenly, he slammed his hand down on the table, startling me. If this is true, he said, his voice trembling with rage, then she not only betrayed me, but she wants to steal your legacy and destroy our family. I saw a pain mixed with determination in his eyes, as if he had just realized that the life he believed in had been shattered by the person he loved. I took his hand and squeezed it tightly. You and I have to cooperate with the police, I said with a determined voice. We can't face her alone. If we stay silent, you'll be in more danger. Benjamin looked at me. His eyes wavered between pain and doubt. I knew he still loved Clara, that he still wanted to believe there was some explanation. But then he took a deep breath and nodded, his eyes reddened. Mom, I'll do what you say. Let's unmask her. I can't let you suffer another loss. That same afternoon, Benjamin and I went to the precinct to see Inspector Carter, whom I had met at a business seminar a couple of years ago. The inspector was a middle-aged man with graying hair, a serious voice, and a penetrating gaze. We sat in a small office with white walls that smelled of coffee. I told him the whole story, from the lunchbox to the lab results, while Benjamin added details about his health. Inspector Carter listened attentively, taking notes and nodding from time to time. This is a very serious case, he said in a serious tone. We'll take the container as evidence and plan to install cameras in your house to monitor her. We'll also need to analyze more food samples. He looked at me and then at Benjamin. But both of you must keep this an absolute secret. We can't let the suspect know we're investigating her. Benjamin nodded, but I saw him clench his fists. Understood, he said in a hoarse voice. I knew he was fighting with himself with the love he once felt for Clara. When we left the precinct, Benjamin remained silent for a long time. We were in the parking lot amidst the hustle and bustle of Washington, D.C. I looked at my son, the young man I had raised, who now seemed to have aged 10 years in a single day. "Mom." He turned to me, his voice choked. I never imagined that the person who slept next to me every night would want to kill me. "But for you, for the brand, for our family, I'll be strong." I walked over and hugged him tightly. His body trembled and I felt his pain mix with mine. "Son, I'm here," I whispered as tears fell silently. "We're going to get through this together." My heart was aching, but filled with determination. From now on, we were no longer victims. We were going to turn the tables, and I would do anything to protect my son, no matter the cost. After leaving the precinct, Benjamin and I sat in the car. No one said a word for several minutes. The car's engine hummed monotonously, but inside me everything was a whirlwind. We had just entered a war where the enemy was someone we had considered family. Benjamin looked out the window, his face tense and his hands clenched on his knees. I knew he was struggling with himself, trapped between love and betrayal. "Mom," he finally said in a low voice. "How are we going to unmask her? I don't want to drag this out any longer." I nodded, feeling my determination grow. "We're going to make her lose her patience, Benjamin. If she really has a plan, she'll make a mistake." When we arrived home, I immediately called Inspector Carter to discuss the plan. He listened and then suggested in a firm voice, "Attack her motive, the money. If she's after the estate, make her believe the opportunity is slipping away. She'll panic and act rashly." His words were like a flash of light in my mind. I immediately thought of the will, something that seemed to interest Clara so much. If I made her believe that the fortune was about to slip through her fingers, she wouldn't be able to stay calm. "I know what to do," I told Carter, feeling like a strategist about to enter battle. The next morning, I called Mr. Harrison, my lawyer. "Mr. Harrison, could you come to the house this afternoon? I want to discuss a new will," I said, making sure my voice was loud as Clara was nearby arranging some flowers in the living room. I saw her stop for a moment. Her hands froze, but she quickly bent down, pretending to continue with her task. I knew she had heard me. That afternoon, when Harrison's car parked in front of the gate, I deliberately opened the main gate so Clara could see him clearly. She was on the porch saying goodbye to a friend, and her gaze slid toward the car with a curiosity she couldn't hide. In the living room, Mr. Harrison and I sat facing each other with the window open so our voices could be heard outside. I spoke in a loud, clear voice. "Mr. Harrison, I've thought about it a lot. In 1 month, I will officially change the will. I want to donate most of my estate to a charitable foundation to build an orphanage for abandoned children. They need that money more than my children do." Harrison, whom I had already briefed on the plan, nodded and played along. "That's a very noble idea, Mrs. Wallace. I'll prepare the documents immediately. What percentage of your assets do you wish to allocate?" I replied deliberately, emphasizing, "At least 80%. The perfume brand, the properties, everything. I want to leave a meaningful legacy." At that moment, I heard some quiet footsteps in the hallway. Clara walked by with a tray of fruit in her hands, but her steps clearly paused for a second. I glanced at her out of the corner of my eye and saw her freeze for a moment, her eyes wide, before she hurried on. My heart raced. She had heard it, and I knew it had touched on her greatest fear. When Harrison left, Clara accompanied him to the door with a forced smile on her lips that no longer felt natural. "Thanks for coming, Mr. Harrison," she said, but her voice trembled slightly, as if she were trying to hide something. That night, I decided to take the plan a step further. I organized a family dinner, as I usually did to maintain a warm atmosphere. Benjamin sat next to me and Clara sat across from us smiling. But her eyes lacked their usual sparkle. As I served the wine, I mentioned the topic of the will again on purpose. "I've thought it over carefully. The perfume brand is my life's work, but I want it to be tied to philanthropy. Donating my assets to the foundation is a way for me to feel at peace." Clara nodded, pretending to agree. "That's so noble of you, Mom. I support you completely." But I saw her clench her wine glass, her red-painted nails digging into the glass. Benjamin played along with me in a gentle but meaningful tone. "That's right. Mom, it's so valuable that you're thinking about society. I also hope that in the future the brand will be associated with a humanitarian image. I glanced at Clara and saw her lower her head, her lips pressed together. At the end of dinner, Clara made an excuse. I have a late appointment at the spa with a friend. I think I'll be home a little late. She got up, grabbed her purse, and left. I pretended to be busy clearing the table, but as I passed the garden, I heard her speaking on the phone in a low, rushed voice. We can't wait another month. We have to act now. My heart stopped. I pretended to cough and went out into the garden as if by chance. Clara was startled and turned around, her eyes wide with panic. My massage appointment was just changed to tomorrow morning. I'm a little tired today, she said, quickly changing her tone before hanging up. I smiled and nodded. Are you tired, my dear? Then rest. Don't overexert yourself. But inside, I knew she was panicking. That night, as I went up to my room, I passed Clara's. The light was on and her silhouette was projected on the curtain, pacing back and forth with the phone pressed to her ear. I stood in the hallway listening to her voice. It was a tense whisper. I have to do something before that old lady signs the new will. I went back to my room, closing the door, my heart pounding 1,000 miles an hour. I knew it was the sign that her anxiety had reached its limit. In the days following that family dinner, the atmosphere in the house became tense. Although on the surface, Benjamin and I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, inside, I felt like I was walking on a tightrope where every step had to be careful because the slightest mistake could ruin everything. One morning, as I was making coffee, Benjamin came into the kitchen looking tired. He sat down, rubbed his forehead, and said in a low voice, Mom, the food Clara has been cooking lately tastes really weird. Yesterday's soup was a little bitter, and the orange juice had a cloudy white sediment. I'm not sure, but... He trailed off, his gaze full of concern. His words were like a stab to the heart. I took his hand, trying to keep my voice steady. Don't eat anything she prepares for you. I'll take care of it. A few days earlier, Inspector Carter had secretly installed a camera in the kitchen, hidden in the corner of the pantry. He arranged for me to be in a small office near the precinct, with a large screen to monitor everything. I sat there with him and another officer, my eyes glued to the monitor. The image was crystal clear. Clara was standing in the kitchen wearing an apron with her hair tied back. She opened a small glass bottle, tilted it slightly, and sprinkled a white powder into the pot of simmering soup. Her movements were slow and careful, as if she had done it hundreds of times. Her face was a mask of coldness, without a hint of doubt, without a trace of emotion. I gripped the edge of the table, my nails digging into the wood until it hurt. I wanted to run in, to yell at her, but Inspector Carter put a hand on my shoulder and said in a low voice, Easy, Mrs. Wallace. We need more evidence. She won't escape. I nodded, but I felt a fire burning inside me. Seeing Clara stir the soup with a faint smile on her lips made me feel like my world was crumbling. The daughter-in-law I had loved, the one I had trusted, was now a stranger, a danger lurking in my own home. I turned to Carter, my voice trembling. Are you sure the camera is recording everything? I don't want her to have any opportunity to deny it. He nodded with a cold look. Everything is being recorded, every detail with clarity. That night, Benjamin ate the dinner Clara prepared, but I had told him to only pretend to try a little. As soon as he put the spoon down, he put his hands to his head, complaining of dizziness, and collapsed onto the couch. Clara ran to him, held him, and said with fake concern, You've been working too much.